The first multi-accelerator BARDA Drive Accelerator network event. We're super excited to welcome you all. My name is Shauna Corey. I'm the director of Biolocity. We're one of the groups co-hosting this event along with our colleagues at New Orleans BioInnovation Center and First Flight. We are 3 of the 13 BARDA Drive Accelerator Network members. And in this role, we are tasked with helping to amplify awareness of BARDA Drives, areas of interest, funding opportunities, and then reciprocally to help drive interface with emerging technologies in each of our ecosystem. And this has been tremendously important as part of the coordinated national response to COVID-19, which is what brings us here today. So big welcome to all of you. A little bit about what to expect from today. Run a show. First, you'll hear a little bit from each of our co-hosting accelerators. We'll then get into a reverse pitch format. So we'll learn a little bit of one of Drive's areas of interest that has an actively available funding opportunity. And then we'll highlight individual technologies from each of our ecosystems and provide expert feedback from leaders and business, venture capital, as well as clinical perspective as it relates to COVID-19. And at the end, if we have some time, we'll open it up for Q&A. So as things progress, if you guys do have questions, I encourage you to use the Q&A function, not necessarily the chat. We won't be monitoring for Q&A there. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little button with talk bubbles that says Q&A. Go ahead and put your question in there. We'll acknowledge it, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So without further ado, a little bit about Biolocity. We are an Atlanta-based incubator and philanthropic funder. We're focused on the commercialization and translation of the most commercially viable innovations coming out of Georgia Tech and Emory University. We do this through a family of offerings that range from broad educational services as well as a competitive funding application process, leading into Biolocity launch, which is where we do active project management, hands-on work with our pool of experts and residents to help get these technologies out the door. This process has been extremely successful. Kristen, thank you. And in the last 5 years, we've funded 42 projects. 22 of these are now parts of startups. We have 2 additional licenses to industry partners, 3 products on the market, and every dollar we've awarded has been leveraged 7 times over in follow-on funding. And so we utilize this family of services not only to impact our campus, but also to help advance BARDA Drive and then their mission as well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Krista Covey at First Flight, one of our other co-hosts. Welcome, Krista.
Thank you, Shauna. Hello, everyone. My name is Krista Covey. I'm the president at First Flight Venture Center. At our core, we are focused on serving high science, high impact companies that are out to change the world. So we are located in the Research Triangle Park in the heart of the Research Triangle in North Carolina. We are 29 years old, almost 30 years old, and we've served over 400 companies. One of the graduates you may know is United Therapeutics. We are focused on helping, obviously, the science companies, so that could mean ag tech, biotech, clean tech, materials, and IT. We have 40 offices and 21 labs. So that means we have about 30 to 40 client companies in our facility at any one time. Of course, as you can see, we've had some great success. In 2019, our client companies were able to receive about 25 million plus in grant funding and 26 million plus in investment. Next slide, please. Here's some of our programming. Liftoff is an opportunity for us to partner with a grant writing organization to help our entrepreneurs and early stage clients receive non-dilutive funding. So they help them apply and win these funds. So we've actually invested about $250,000 into this program, and our client companies have received $16 million in awarded grant funding. So that's pretty exciting. We're also very proud to be the SBA FAST award winner, so we can continue to expand our outreach and serve minority and rural communities with non-dilutive funding opportunities for their companies. We also have Hangar 6, which is a unique advanced prototyping facility. Among all the really cool equipment that we have on site, we have an industrial designer who helps walk our entrepreneurs through the process, the iterative process of developing a working prototype inexpensively. And then, of course, we layer mentoring and serve our entrepreneurs with entrepreneurs in residence as well for various stages of growth. And we are very proud to be one of 13 Drive accelerators. And of course, we're really happy to be a part of this multi-accelerator event today. So with that, I will turn it over to my new friend, Chris Khalil.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Krista. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you for this first multi-accelerator showcase, part of BARDA Drive program. My name is Chris Khalil, and I'm the Executive Director of the New Orleans BioInnovation Center. NOBIC works closely with local academic institutions and other economic development entities to develop cutting-edge research, curate pilot projects with healthcare providers, and attract necessary complementary funding. Our mission is to create a successful biotech ecosystem by providing these companies with customized commercialization services, premier facilities, and a comprehensive support network. We also have an early stage favorable funding vehicle called the New Orleans BioFund. Next slide, please. We're located at 1441 Canal Street in the middle of downtown New Orleans. We call this the biotech corridor that's forming in New Orleans, Louisiana, in very close walking proximity to 2.5 med schools and 2 $1 billion hospitals that were just emerged in the last 2 years. Next slide, please. We have a three-pronged approach in providing access to our facilities, our commercialization services, and our support network. One of the ways that we do this is by having hybrid events, both in person and virtual, as you see today. One of the things we're extremely proud about, next slide please, is our results for the support we provided to companies. So our organization was founded in early 2002, but our building was opened in 2011 due to delays due to Hurricane Katrina. And since Hurricane Katrina, we've seen a massive growth in the life science and biotech economy, thanks in part due to some of the support services that our organization has provided entrepreneurs and scientists emerging from our research institutions. So as you can see, part of what we do is help companies obtain SBIR, STTR grant awards and get them their first customers. One thing we also focus on is helping companies and entrepreneurs get their first check and structure their first investment. And we're able to help do this for companies through our BioFund. Next slide, please. So in addition to that, we have a core lab that we provide available for companies to use pro bono or at low or below market rate. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. And we also have access to specialized equipment from our core partners, such as the universities that are within walking distance of our facility. Next slide, please. As we all deal with acclimating to the new normal, the BioInnovation Center has stepped up to be a voice in the mission to combat COVID-19. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we've been working on is helping our companies that are in our building pivot towards producing COVID-19 countermeasures. For example, we've had a few companies at the BioInnovation Center who were diagnostic labs, and they were interested in getting CLIA certification and being able to provide overflow testing for our hospital community, which is a dire need at the moment, particularly in our market. So we were able to turn these around, and now we have active overflow testing ongoing in our labs. As part of our partnership with BARDA Drive, we're able to provide wraparound support for companies that are producing COVID-19 countermeasures, whether it's a novel technology emerging out of a lab or a company that's pivoting their current technology towards a health security initiative. We also have provided financial support and outreach for our companies that are in our portfolio and that are clients of ours. And that includes making sure they have the proper amount of liquidity to face this crisis and finding new grant opportunities that would help them bolster their technology and their product development. We've also continued to invest in companies through our early stage fund, the New Orleans Bio Fund. And just so everyone's aware, we're still doing deals in Louisiana, as well as RTP, Atlanta, Houston, and Austin. So if you have an interesting technology, please do talk to us. We'd love to chat with you. Next slide, please. And we do this all through the support of our partners and our sponsors. And without them, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. So with that, I really appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great time at our webinar. Thank you very much. Next, we'd love to introduce you to the BARDA panel, Dr. Kim, Donna, and Abid. So Donna, please take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Hoping you can hear me. I'm Donna Boston, and I'm with the, I'm a government employee with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We're based in Washington, D.C., right here where the headquarters are for Health and Human Services. And we are, BARDA is a component of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, ASPR. And within BARDA, which is a big part of the Medical Countermeasures Program, within BARDA, we launched a new division called Division of Research, Innovation, and Ventures. So the reason I'm going to give you a very brief talk today is just to provide a very high-level background of DRIVE and what the program's all about, maybe a little bit about BARDA, but I really encourage people who are interested in learning more about the background of BARDA and why we exist and what we do, please go online, and best way to do it is just Google, of course. Google search for BARDA. But DRIVE itself, we have our own website, drive.hhs.gov, and you'll see that later on the contact slide. But before I begin, I want to thank our accelerators today for pulling this together, Biolocity, First Flight Venture Center, New Orleans BioInnovation Center. You guys have done a great job, and this event, this virtual event that we're having today to bring attention to BARDA and what our mission areas and needs are, this really bears witness to why we have an accelerator network. Here we are in Washington, D.C. Of course, we're all working from home now, but we're in the DMV, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. And we just can't get out there and see what kind of exciting new things are happening in the, the biotech life science space that we're interested in the outer regions. So you saw that map earlier, 13 accelerators across the country. Wow, that just magnifies our message and magnifies our opportunity to work with startups, entrepreneurs, people who, just may not otherwise have that opportunity to work with the government. So it's kind of a new way of doing things. We've been thrilled with the way the accelerators have been able to really come through for us. And so thanks again. This is a wonderful example of what can be done when we collaborate. So next slide, I'm just again going to give a very high level overview of DRIVE, starting with our parent organization, the ASPR. The ASPR is the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, whose mission it is to save lives and protect Americans from all threats across the threat spectrum. They can be natural or intentional. So, a big part of BARDA is the Project BioShield program, which was established in response to the anthrax, post 9/11 anthrax activities, which you may recall. We have a program that looks at the ChemBio rad nuke side of the threats, as well as the pandemic influenza and emerging infectious disease threats. and prepare for those incidents by developing medical countermeasures, vaccines, therapeutics, and stockpiles. And we take those medical countermeasures through the regulatory pipeline and into product market commercialization or strategic national stockpile. So the ASPR is the lead organization. Next slide, please. And under the ASPR resides BARDA, among other programs, of course, but BARDA, again, is sort of the point for the medical countermeasures program, developing vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics against a cross-section of threats, as I described earlier. But I want to bring your attention to the yellow box at the bottom there. That's the DRIVE division that we're part of. And we were launched 2 years ago to deliberately, make the effort to bring products into the pipeline where our innovations and new and novel technologies that can help sort of fill the need for, transformational, I should say, new ways, new paradigms in health security. So we're really charged with going out and doing things in whole new ways, and much more is to come regarding the venture side. We're very excited that we're going to be able to stand up a venture side of our division. But for now, we are here to talk to you today about just a couple of our research areas of interest, I should say advanced development areas of interest, and always open for questions today or following this event. You can always reach out to us. So the next slide, please. Within DRIVE, under normal circumstances, before COVID kind of took over our lives, we have 3 sort of program areas of interest that we are hyper-focused on. One of them being ENACT, which is the Early Notification to Act, Control, and Treat. The program really centers around answering the question, can we identify infection before people are symptomatic, using various host response indicators. So pathogen agnostic, just looking to see if we can identify infection early, to intervene early. And the Solving Sepsis program, the second area, is similar in that it is looking to predict and identify when sepsis is going to become onset in a patient population. So in a clinical setting, is there a standardized way that we can understand sepsis onset, and so that we can intervene earlier? Sepsis is a huge problem. And again, that's a very host-based type program, but we're developing, learning more about the host response, as well as devices and technologies that can standardize the understanding and prediction of sepsis. The third area is our interface office. This is really where we bridge our science and our business aspects of the program. So this is supporting, this is where the Accelerator Network comes in, the Ventures program. This is supporting the companies, the startups, the community of developers that are helping us focus on our mission areas, such as ENACT and sepsis, and more to come. So the next slide, please. For obtaining funding through DRIVE, we have our very own broad agency announcement. We call it the EZ BAA because we think it's pretty easy compared to a standard BAA process. BARDA, of course, our parent organization, BARDA is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, has its own broad agency announcement, and it's huge. It has 16 areas of interest, and you're more than welcome to ask us about that. Probably best to take those questions offline because I could spend all day talking about the BARDA 16 areas of interest. But for DRIVE specifically, our broad agency announcement is easier to work with, but it has a lower dollar limit. It's capped at $750,000 so that we can turn projects over more quickly, see what's possible, and then graduate them, transition them hopefully to a bigger program or to commercial stage if possible. So the process is well, it's not without its hurdles, but we try to make, in the end, we try to make it a relatively easy process because we are able to do things a little more efficiently by working through the online system. So you would read the solicitation first, and you can find out about that by going to that website I mentioned earlier, drive.hhs.gov. And then work with your regional accelerator. If you're involved with any of the 3 today that are involved in organizing this event, work with your accelerator to see if your idea really has merit with or aligns with one of our programs. You know, we ask for a cost share just to, you know, kind of back up your application. You need to be registered in several government programs. The SAMS account will be required. The Drive Digital Resource account will be necessary in order for you to apply because that's the online portal. And then you submit. Currently, our areas of interest are closed, the ones that I briefed on the last slide, ENACT, Solving Sepsis, because COVID has, like I said, taken over our lives. So we kind of put everything on pause while we opened areas of interest that were focused on addressing the response to COVID. And so our current focus is on rapidly deployable capabilities, and our next speaker is a fellow program manager. She and I work together in the DRIVE program as PMs, and I'm going to introduce her to you now, Dr. Kim Sharetta. If you want to go to our next slide before Kim doesn't have slides to speak to. She's going to talk to you about the area of interest, but I just will wrap up with this final slide or two on the 26 companies that we've invested in to date. As you can see, many of them are relatively new to the space, but some of them are established companies. And my final slide, again, is that contact information so that you could reach out to us. If you want to advance to that last slide on how to reach out to us. You can either leave that up or Christina, if you're running the slide deck, you can leave that up or return to the photo slide. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Kim. Thank you. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, accelerators, for inviting me to speak about some of our work with the Rapidly Deployable Capabilities team for COVID-19. So I'm Kim Sharetta. You may know me as the Solving Sepsis Program Manager within BARDA Drive, as Donna had mentioned, but for COVID-19, I've been also leading a team called Rapidly Deployable Capabilities. So I just want to make sure it's clear that our Solving Sepsis and ENACT and other programs within DRIVE are all still alive and operational, and we're in operation. We're just not, as Donna said, the ECBA is just not open to accept proposals at this time. But for COVID-19, we do have the one topic that I'm leading, 4.1D in the ECBAA. This is remote patient monitoring and remote diagnostic tools. We just updated this topic on June 30th to extend the date to close until October 31st. And there were also some minor modifications to the topic, so I encourage you to look at the latest special instructions. It's Special Instructions 9 to read the topic, but I will go over some of these, review the area of interest and some of our interests and some of these changes to the topic in this talk. So the whole goal of establishing the Rapidly Deployable Capabilities team was to allow for adjunctive technologies to, for us to be able to pilot these and clinically validate these during COVID-19. We know that the efforts that we're doing across government in terms of developing diagnostics and developing therapeutics and vaccines are extremely critical to the response. But we had a vision that some of these technologies that we were already investing in DRIVE could aid in flattening that curve. So they could support social distancing, prevent overcrowding in hospitals, help physicians and patients make decisions about their illness. And the great thing about the Solving Sepsis and ENACT programs within DRIVE is that these programs are really agnostic to any threat. So ENACT was focused on being able to identify infection prior to symptomology and sepsis can arise from any infection. So the technologies that we were developing under those programs lent themselves to address COVID-19 naturally, and then we built upon that for the rapidly deployable capabilities team. So the specific focuses of this group are to empower there are three main areas. One is to empower the patient, and this is to allow for self-monitoring capabilities so the patient can determine whether they've been infected, how sick they are, so disease severity, and whether their health is deteriorating. So if they know that they are sick or infected with SARS-CoV-2, how sick are they? Do they need to go to a hospital? Does their care need to be escalated? The second was to empower the healthcare providers. So to enable some of these remote monitoring tools, so a healthcare provider could monitor the health of their patients from a distant location. And this can help them as well in prognosticating outcomes of that patient, and also to know if they need escalated care. So to move from a certain clinical setting or pre-hospital setting into the hospital. And this is especially useful where there may be resource limited settings or you're trying to prevent interaction within a healthcare facility. And the last area was the ability to triage, or is the ability to triage severely ill and to aid in allocation of resources. So what we're trying to prevent is overcrowding in any of these urgent care centers or emergency departments, that when patients are sick and coming in, how can we help those physicians make decisions about how sick these patients are? Do they need to be admitted into the hospital? Do they need ICU level care? Or even once they are admitted, how do we know can we identify those patients whose health is going to deteriorate and if they're going to decompensate? And then this can help the healthcare providers allocate resources appropriately and reduce burden within the hospital from admitting individuals or having individuals in there that may not be of ultimate priority for care. So this can help in resources in terms of personnel and also in materials as well. So we're interested in those three bins, and we're thinking about the patient in terms of the entire care continuum for COVID. So in that pre-infection space, through that infection space. So that's that pre-symptomatic detection, early detection of infection, but that also includes the asymptomatic detection of COVID-19. And then once the patients are sick or mildly ill, being able to determine how sick they are in that stage. So monitoring them from that pre-hospital stage of mild illness through potentially an acute phase of illness or need to be admitted into a hospital. And then from that acute phase or inpatient phase, monitoring the patient through recovery and even post-discharge from the hospital. So that entire care continuum of the patient. So these technologies that can help and these adjunctive technologies that we're interested can include smartphone apps or mobile applications, wearable technologies, sensors, minimally or non-invasive sensors, and algorithm-based tools, those that can integrate with these mobile apps or some of these other remote monitoring technologies and interpretation of the data, or those that can integrate into the EHR within hospital systems. And these algorithms may be that are of interest are those that can predict, identify, or prognosticate these risk trajectories of the patient. Even clinical decision support or CDS type tools, continuous monitoring devices as well, and other telemedicine applications. So it's a broad range of these remote monitoring, digital health, diagnostic devices. So we're interested in technologies that are in advanced development, and this is because we want them to have impact in this outbreak. We're primarily interested in piloting technologies that are already at that later stage of development and just need to gather some additional data to support the development path or additional data to support use or clinically validate in a certain clinical setting. We're primarily interested in products that already have achieved FDA clearance or are on the final stages to that, or are pursuing an EUA and can do that fairly quickly. That, of course, only applies if this is relevant to the types of technology that you're developing. We're not interested in pathogen-based approaches under this topic. we are interested in looking at the host response. So this can be any sort of range of biological, immunological, biometric device, clinical, physiological data, laboratory data, clinical data, anything that can be captured, incorporated, and analyzed to inform on the patient's status. The total period of performance of these studies, we're trying to move rapidly, hence the name Rapidly Deployable Capabilities. And we want these technologies to have impact again in this outbreak. So there should be a short development timeline and then an ability to rapidly scale and deploy within less than 90 days. Software tools should be able to be integrated into EHRs in less than 30 days. We don't want long lead times for development or infrastructure establishment, because again, that can delay use in this outbreak. All of these tools should require very little training to deploy and support. Again, this helps facilitate that rapid deployment. And if you are interested in applying into this topic, we are interested in that commercialization strategy. So again, how you're taking your development effort or your clinical validation effort that you're doing with us, and how are you going to scale that or have impact again in this outbreak. As I mentioned, we're not interested in pathogen targeted approaches, serology diagnostics, or benchtop diagnostics. There were other topics previously open in the EZBA that address these areas. And again, it's not that these are not of interest to the response, but just for our team and this specific topic, we are interested in the host-based approaches, remote monitoring types of technologies I just described. We've made several investments to date, and this continues to grow, and you can follow what we've invested in to date under on our medicalcountermeasures.gov website. There is a link, we've revamped that website recently, but there is a way to navigate to the COVID-19 medical countermeasures portfolio. And there's a specific button that will bring you to, that you can click on and bring you to the rapidly deployable capabilities investments. If you have any questions about this topic or what we're doing within the team, feel free to reach out to me. And it's easier to email our resource mailbox, and you can ensure somebody will respond to you. It's COVID-19DXEZBAA@hhs.gov. And that email address is also within the Special Instructions 9. If you look at that topic, there is a section about how to contact individuals if you have questions about the topic. More information about how to apply can be found on our DRIVE website, drive.hhs.gov. And I will pause there for questions. Thank you.
Great. So we have some questions in Q&A. I would, if someone from BARDA would like to moderate, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I'd be happy to do it.
Yeah, Shauna, this is Abid. I'll go ahead and take some of these questions. You know, the first question we have here is how does a company get matched to a DRIVE accelerator? And you know, I'd love to get the accelerators to add to this, but you know, generally speaking, once DRIVE funds a company, we have what we call as an intake call, which is just an exploratory call to understand the vision for your business or your technology, understand the different hurdles that you might face, and you know, we kind of tease out some of these potential problem areas or interest areas for your company that you want to work on, and then we go ahead and survey our accelerators and match the accelerators that are best suited to address those problem areas. So I think the first step there is you know, once you get funded, we then kind of deep dive into your business, understand some of the vision, product hurdles that you might face from a regulatory or legal perspective, and then we work with our accelerators to kind of help you through and navigate that process. So that could mean anything from, you know, applying to a cohort program, it could be attending a boot camp, it could be attending a subject-specific event that accelerator could be exclusively offering to their network, which now that you're a part of, you have access to. So those are the type of opportunities our accelerators, you know, really help our funded companies kind of progress and take their business to the next step. I think that answers the questions, actually. It was just one of them. It was accelerator related. Did the accelerators have anything that they wanted to add? Feel free to open up.
This is Donna. I was typing a response, but I'll just go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, if you're at a stage where you have not, approached BARDA and you're just wondering about how to talk to an accelerator, maybe because you're wondering if you are a match, just reach out directly to any of our 13 accelerators. You can go to the one that makes the most sense geographically, but I mean, any of them are open to talking with new companies about, your technology and helping you assess the state of your technology. We definitely have that open relationship. Or you can reach out directly to us and we'd be happy to make that connection or that introduction as well.
Great.
All the accelerators, certainly the 3 that we're speaking with today, but any of them in our network all have websites too, that you could gain access to them.
Could you maybe speak a little bit about how you assess the readiness of a technology that's seeking funding from DRIVE?
Is that mostly a question for Kim in respect to
within this
the area of interest she just spoke about? I'll let Kim tackle that first.
Sure. So we're not really following TRL levels like you might see in other topics. Again, because the development path is a little bit different for many of these technologies now, many are seeking EUAs. We're more, you need to justify to us your readiness stage and how quickly you can move and pivot and collect the amount of data that you need in order to bring this through to that regulatory approval or that EUA stage to scale for clinical validation and to deploy it. So it's really a matter of the offerer justifying their stage of development and readiness with the technology. Over.
Thanks, that's super helpful.
In case people don't know what TRL is, that's technology readiness level, and that's sort of a government ease for assessing readiness from level 1 to level 9. And it's often determined by how much proof of concept work has been done, how much, what phase of, in terms of medical countermeasures, in terms of a medical development program, like a vaccine or a therapeutic, what phase of testing you've been through, diagnostics as well, how far along in verification and validation towards that final end goal of technology readiness level 9, which would be a commercially marketed product. So that's what we mean by TRL. And like Kim said, we're sort of TRL agnostic on the DRIVE program. We want to see that you have some, we want a company's offer to show that it's got some legs under it, that it's done some basic, proof of concept work, but we're definitely open to kind of making those assessments. When you apply to the Easy BAA, if a company feels ready to apply, we try to review those very quickly. It's not a long drawn out process like it can be with other solicitations. We try to turn them over within 30 days. So you would either hear a response one way or the other, give or take 30 days after you apply. Of course, with COVID, it's been a much longer response period because we've been inundated, but that's the general idea. We would give you feedback one way or the other, and then you could at least know if it's not accepted, you would at least know what to, what to do to further your readiness for us.
Donna, this is Mary Beth Thomas. I work really closely with Emil and First Flight, and we've had the pleasure of meeting in the past. Having had knowledge of ENACT, one of your original program areas, I'm just wondering whether you feel like you've been able, that was funding some of these types of technologies, the early notification, and how can we get ahead of an infection before someone realizes they are actually infected? And I'm wondering if you've been able to pivot any of these more rapidly, some of the things that you funded early, in order to address any of the COVID work. Over.
So this is Kim. I can answer that. So first of all, Shayla Selamovich is the program manager for ENACT. I don't know if you've had the privilege of meeting with her yet, but we can definitely, or Donna can definitely set up an introduction if you'd like to chat with her. The ENACT program and the sepsis program, as I mentioned, are still ongoing. We're just not accepting new proposals. And if you look at some of the awards under rapidly deployable capabilities, you may recognize some of those names as similar companies that we've partnered with previously for ENACT or had some sort of engagement with. So you may want to check that out. But yes, between the sepsis portfolio and the ENACT portfolio, there were some technologies that were relevant to this space, and that we were able to leverage kind of those capabilities for COVID-19 as well through separate awards. But you'll see that under the rapidly deployable capabilities tab on the medicalcountermeasures.gov website.
Great, thanks so much. Chris?
All right, good afternoon again, everyone. So everyone knows, digital health innovations have allowed for continued patient care during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the future of digital health has now hit warp speed, revolutionizing healthcare at an unprecedented pace and offering game-changing solutions to this problem. Today, our expert panel includes multiple perspectives from industry leaders and investors with deep experience in digital health, infectious disease, health security, and more. We thank them and we thank our presenters for being here to share their vision for the future of digital health as it relates to COVID-19 and to provide Q&A and feedback to our presenters. The panelists will be available for direct Q&A at the end of our seminar today and are open if you'd like to reach out to them individually. As our BARDA panelists have already been introduced, I'd like to invite our industry and investor panelists to take 1 to 2 minutes max, as I've been notified that we're just a couple minutes over. I would love for you guys to please introduce yourself to the group in the following order: Dr. Mary Beth Thomas, Karen Levert, Dr. Colleen Kraft, Jennifer Hart, and Ulili Anovek-Puri. So please, Dr. Mary Beth, take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Beth Thomas. I am a Senior Vice President at the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. For those of you that don't know NC Biotech, we are an independent nonprofit that has been around in the Research Triangle region of North Carolina for about 35 years. We are largely state funded, although we do have a number of other external revenue lines that allow us to do a number of different things. NC Biotech's really a technology-based economic development organization. We focus for the state of North Carolina on fostering life science, technology development, and commercialization through usually funding at the very earliest stages. I have the privilege of leading our funding programs. At the Biotech Center, we engage with many of our university partners to fund through grant programs, around translational projects, which is the beginning of the pipeline that moves things out of our universities and into companies. I also get to lead a group that has a small business loan program that engages directly with our industry partners and is oftentimes the very first money into these companies that help grow in North Carolina. And I have importantly, while I don't lead it, I have a peer in NC Biotech that actually works in the more traditional economic development realm and partners with our state level folks in our Department of Commerce to help with expansion and recruitments of more established companies. So NC Biotech, if you kind of look at North Carolina, is one of those organizations that we kind of focus on growing things internal to North Carolina, as well as promoting North Carolina and pulling new businesses into North Carolina. We've been around for, as I said, 35 years. I think we're considered a pretty good success. I'll leave First Flight. We're good partners with First Flight. And over that 35 years, we've deployed over $200 million of state funds in 3,000 different awards that covers a broad spectrum of activities. And I think in general, we have really good success with our grant programs, returning For every $1 NC Biotech puts in, we get upwards of $57 of external funds coming in. And our loan programs are even more successful, where those companies pull in $108 for every $1 they get from NC Biotech. So from a multiplicity factor, I think that's where we come at it. And we really focus on this early stage commercialization stage. So I think that's why Emil invited me onto the panel today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Karen?
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen Levert. It's good to be here, and especially hearing from partners from the Biotech Center and First Flight. I'm a venture partner at Pappas Capital. Pappas Capital is a venture firm here in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. We're focused in the life sciences space. We've invested close to $500 million over the last 25 years. Most of the targeted companies are a little bit later stage than spin-offs or early stage companies. I personally have spent 18 years commercializing early stage technologies, so I understand both the promise and challenge of that. And I'm actually I've joined Pappas Capital under their specialized fund management structure, because I will be starting an early stage fund there. We're underway with that. So I think that's all I'll say for now. I look forward to hearing the presentations and providing some more feedback. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Dr. Kraft?
Hi, my name is Colleen Kraft. I'm a infectious disease physician and medical microbiologist, so I do a lot in CLIA certified laboratories. And I've also spent a lot of time looking at different diagnostic testing. I'm a part of our RADx NIH funded group here, where we're looking at point of care testing for SARS-CoV-2. I'm also an associate chief medical officer of Emory Hospital, so I think a lot about also the financials and the pragmatic aspects. So a lot of my questions today will probably be about, you know, rolling things out and how they're going to be operationalized in addition to their scientific and clinical value.
Next, we have Jen Verhart.
Hey there. Welcome to the spare room of my house. I love these virtual conferences. So I'm Director of Investments for Health and Digital Health at Ben Franklin Technology Partners. And Ben Franklin, and there are some others, we each have separate boards and separate CEOs. We're confusingly similarly named because we were conceived of before the internet. So we've been around, you know, for some 35 years. But I'm in the one based in the Philadelphia area, and we make our investments in our backyard and do have state backing. We've spun out a for-profit fund called Go Philly, which is more location agnostic, ironically, because it's called Go Philly. But just let me talk about very briefly philosophy of investments, and I get the advantage of every now and then being able to present to my board a vision and a change of investment thesis. And when I presented to them about where we're going in the next 5 years, in February, I probably spooked them because I talked about a pandemic, you know, but those of us in life sciences were kind of seeing the writing on the wall. But also, you know, the economic circumstances in which we make investments, and just the reality that we don't look at technology that linearly in our sector because healthcare is so complex. Healthcare has multiple interested parties in any one transaction. So we are always thinking about even decision sciences in clinical medicine, how people pull in data, whether decisions are good, how patients are even interacting with the healthcare system, how payers end up influencing shorter-term decision-making about health versus long-term. And so we're operating in that complex environment. And we do, under what I do in the investment group, we do about 5 to 10 million a year of investments, and about a third to half of that is in health. And we have backing, like I said, from the state, but also Independence Blue Cross, some local pension funds, and we're continuing to develop new relationships. and talking about developing a health-specific fund that will also look at health in this way. So we're expanding to make sure health is viewed very broadly and includes developmental health. We do technology investment in the healthcare IT space that crosses over into education. So our recent COVID rescue funding that we did in May, where we put some money out into some very COVID related projects, even included like remote education for autism at home, not just wearables and detection and respiratory health management and things like that. So we are really trying to cast a wide net. So that's a bit about us. You can always message me on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about us. And I've been involved with Chris and his predecessors at the BioInnovation Center on the investment committee of the BioFund since it started. So that's me.
Thank you, Jen, and we can't thank you enough for that. Last but not least, our last industry investor panelist, Ulilia Novak-Puri.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon where you are. Good morning to the folks who are on in the Pacific time zones like I am. My name is Ulilia Novak-Puri. I'm a partner at KPOR Capital focusing on our healthcare investments. KPOR Capital is a early stage social impact venture capital firm. We define our impact as working with companies who close gaps of access and or opportunity for low-income communities and or communities of color. So what that looks like on the healthcare side is those working on disease states that disproportionately affect communities of color and or low-income communities, or those who are working on reducing the cost of care. We are usually the first institutional check-in, and we work very closely with our companies to help them either begin the FDA approval process if they haven't started it, or get connected to folks in terms of commercialization for folks who've already completed the FDA approval process. We are located in Oakland, California, but we are location agnostic in terms of the United States. For us, we're really looking for who directly benefits as a result of the solution. Thanks.
Okay, hello everyone. Again, my name is Krista Covey and we're going to transition into our tech team presentations. So we will have 3 presentations. The tech teams will have 5 minutes to present, and then we will ask our esteemed panelists to provide some questions and feedback, and we will limit that time to about 10 minutes for each team. So for the first team introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Krista. Appreciate it. So without any further ado, I'd love to introduce our first panelist, our first presenter, Dr. Nasir Marouche, who is a globally renowned electrophysiologist, a pioneer in the treatment of atrial fibrillation, and now a guru on wearable diagnostics. He's a tenured professor in the Division of Cardiovascular Medicine within the Department of Internal Medicine at Tulane and the director of the Electrophysiology Division. His skills in biotech, cardiac electrophysiology, healthcare, clinical research have been honed over a lengthy career with notable posts at Cleveland Clinic and at UCSF. True to his belief in open innovation, he also initiated the Department of Triad, which is a collaborative arrhythmia center that is bringing together a cross-departmental team of physicians, scientists, researchers, MRI, and imaging specialists who are dedicated to working collaboratively to innovatively improve successful prediction, prevention, and outcomes in the treatment of cardiovascular disease, particularly as it relates to COVID-19 at this point. We're blessed to have Dr. Marouche here to share his research with us on the BioStrat platform and remotely diagnosing arrhythmias and other heart abnormalities of COVID patients. Take it away, Dr. Marouche.
Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. First question I have to ask when I give a Zoom call, can you hear me? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, do I have, so I need to put my slides on share screen. Sorry. Okay, can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Great. So when I talk about the WeCore trial as introduction to the use of wearables in the COVID era, detecting cardiovascular and mental consequences post-COVID. This is fresh out of the oven today as a refresher for everybody. We in Louisiana are number 5 in the world, if you compare us to countries. This is out of New York Times today in the morning, in terms of infections per million patient, as you can tip per million inhabitants. So 2,000 patients we're getting in Louisiana, unfortunately, these days. We are 5 in the world. You guys in, you see like Arizona, Florida, and 5 American states, the top 5. And that's a sad news, but this is sad reality. 1 out of 5 patients today, you all probably see these numbers, have cardiovascular complications, hospitalized in COVID-19 in America alone, across the world. And what we know, and this has been shown again and again, that the virus does penetrate the cardiovascular, the cardiac myocyte, or the heart cells. The ones doesn't know what the expression means. Cardiovascular complications has been reported multiple times from first reports from Wuhan, across Europe, and here in the States. We're seeing up to 17% arrhythmias, up to 28% MIs or heart attacks, up to 5% strokes and heart failure. The question is that we're asking ourselves, what happens if these patients leave home? When they get discharged? If you get infected today, we're seeing more and more data that there is a severe or serious consequences of this disease that we have to deal with. You know, from the heart scarring perspective, lung scarring perspective, from arrhythmia perspective, heart failure, you know, as a consequence of the myocarditis of COVID, the clotting story, you have been hearing about it a lot across the system, the cardiovascular system, and depleted immune system, we know about it a lot. But as important, we're hearing more and more news about the mental consequences of COVID-19, short-term and long-term, like PTSD, anxiety, and depression. That's a question that we're here trying to quantify and study using wearables. And why wearables? I mean, the list can go on and on and on. But as you all can tell, a wearable device like the one I have in my hand, if you can see my image, a real-time continuous monitoring. Now I've been monitored to not only my behavior and exercise level and so on, but beyond. Data that I'm collecting with this second by second are unbelievable in terms of somebody like me who's a researcher, analytics, interested in outcome and AI. And very important, that's something we neglect when I talk from my perspective as a digital health committee chair for my society in the last 3 years in Heart Rhythm Society. We've been dealing with empowering the patient with these devices. The patient have these tools around them. They can act on it. They can assess it. We're trying to implement this in the WeCore trial, as we're going to show you. And last but not least, we talk about social distancing, you know, and the economic hurdles are going to be affected by such a device like the wearable that we're using it today. I mean, it was research we're working on. The pandemic brought these devices or catalyzed the adoption into our clinics very fast, within 3 months. This is part of our daily practice now, trying to assess as much information as we can. So keeping social distancing, improving clinic visits, keeping the patient away from the clinics, that have a major, major economic impact as well. The WeCore trial, I put it here on this slide, it's using wearable devices to investigate the long-term impact of COVID-19 in cardiovascular and behavioral health. The device we're using, the BioStrap device, as listed here, is this. I have it on my wrist as well. You can see it. This is an app. You can look it up. And the reason why we chose this device is for the extensive amount of data we're collecting. It's beyond the ones you've seen. You see watches from Apple, from Samsung, from others, Fitbit. What we found unique here, the partnership we built and the way we're working with these guys is, you know, the list of data I showed you. This is the daily minute-by-minute data, heart rate variability, sleep pattern, very important to us. Your exercise level, cardiovascular exercise, breathing rate, very important for the COVID recurrence and so on, oxygen saturation, as you can tell, not only cardiovascular importance, but also your lungs and pulmonary impact. The data we can collect, we can clinically dissected on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and I said at the beginning, not only at the minute-by-minute basis. This is something that we've been investing in a lot in terms of people listening here. How can we take this data, not only a long-term effect, but only daily patterns? We call it pulse report. So we can record 5 minutes per day in each human being that have this device on. And I get a report like this. And the work we're doing is really investing in this here, these two blue arrows that you can see, how we can take the PPG data, these waves, and transfer them into something useful down the road, predicting what we want to see, predicting what's going to happen. From heart rate variability, as you all know, this is up here in the upper corner. Sorry, I want to go back. This is in the upper corner here. Heart rate variability, heart rate behavior, and O2. How we take all the data all together and try to predict not only, I'm sorry, I'm not sure why my mouse is moving on its own, not only the neuromodulation, neurovascular modulation, or neuromodulation of our body, like sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, and you see here frequency domain analysis, but also arterial elasticity. We have data, how can we dissect using AI and machine learning, this every single part of this curve, you know, the pulse pressure curve you've seen here in PPG, to come up with these data. Okay, so that's what we're looking at, and how implication on these patients long-term and short-term. And also, we have solid data supporting the use of arrhythmia reduction with a point care plot from this daily practice, overnight, during the day, and 5 minutes recording. As excited we are about this here, which is how we assess the consequences of COVID-19 on the mental status of our patients. So we partnering from part of the Triad Center using the BioStrat app and the healthcare questionnaire, the mental questionnaire put together, the behavioral questionnaire, as we call it here at Tulane, partnership with the social work and the dean and his team as part of the Triad team to come up with this questionnaire that's been established and defined over the years, integrated. So today, if you are part of the study as a patient, you will get, if we see any changes in terms of heart rate and anything out of the norm, you get a questionnaire popped up to ask you specific questions. Although you have a daily 5 questions, simple question to answer, but if you see anything outside the norm, we're popping up extra questions to detail the changes you're seeing. Are you anxious? Are you depressed? What can we learn from this? And as you know, the consequences of disease, especially affecting the brain from infection perspective and the microvascular clotting perspective, this could be enormous in terms of understanding what's beyond the acute changes in the hospital. The tool we've been using has been proven, has been defined multiple times and been shown to accurately predict arrhythmias, like we've seen here. We presented this a couple of times, arrhythmia AFib, atrial fibrillation, PVCs, VTs, and so on, as well as the correlation between the SpO2 that we measure on the patient's finger versus the BioStrap device. Correlation is very well established. Heart rate variability from as you can tell from this slide, we showed it to correlate very well with your sleep pattern, not only but O2 depression. As you can tell, there's a disease that all of you know about called the sleep apnea, and that seems to be a very valid tool to define that. So to summarize everything I said, what we're trying to do here from this study, and I'll put it one by one, we have a lot of input. I mean, the patient demographics, the clinical data, the COVID-19, we're collecting this enormous amount of data. I want to take this plus the behavioral information and the mental status of the patient to run it with our algorithm that we're defining. That's really the core of the study. That's where you see the we core there. I highlighted the AI in the middle to understand what the output would be. Are we detecting disease, detecting recurrence of COVID-19, detecting changes that affect it with this early on before they get into action, in terms of becoming a stroke or becoming an arrhythmia or becoming heart failure and so on. And obviously using AI, we are so excited about predictive models we're going to put in place. We are focusing a lot on this. And last but not least, how can we put this into a preventative measures that will save this group patient, in this case, the COVID-19 population, from severe consequences. I listed for you here the 4 key take-home messages. we are going to assess cardiovascular behavioral health status from this study, and hopefully we succeed doing so prospectively. Wearable monitoring devices after this pandemic became a standard of care, or practically in a part of our daily practice as physician and treating cardiovascular physician and beyond. Extensive biometric data will, no doubt, that's the beauty about this tool and others. This era of the pandemic drove us to massive amount of data. We talk about AI in medicine a lot, and all of you have been involved in this in a way or another. But the key, what is missing is data collection. And now we have the opportunity, because of these remote monitoring devices, to have this enormous amount of data, because patients are open to using it. And not only because they like to help science and understand their health, but they feel empowered. First time in centuries, I think I've been dealing for two, actually, in 2 decades I'm dealing with as an attending professor in medicine, physician, that I see that my patient knows so much and informs so much about his life and can act on this accordingly. He usually wait to see me, or she usually wait to see me 3 months visit or 6 months visit, but now they're so important that they can act on their information immediately with connecting with us or maybe themselves. Machine learning, I'm so excited about this whole concept that we're putting in place to bring machine learning into real action finally. Now we have the tools and hopefully the data that we need collecting from this study that will empower us to do the next big step. And this is me showing off who I am, the last slide. Questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Marouche. At this point, we'd love to invite our industry, investor, and BARDA panelists to share their screens and unmute themselves. And please feel free to jump in and ask Dr. Marouche any questions you might have at this time.
Thank you. You mean share screen, start your video, right?
Apologies, start your video. That's exactly what
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be sharing. Okay, I guess I had a number of questions. How does this compare to other wearables in terms of, is the proprietary aspect of this that this is better than the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, and all that aspect? Is that what the proprietary aspect is?
I think
with the analysis.
Yes, it is exactly. Not only, I think the capability of the device, I mean, the data I showed to you, if you look at the Fitbit today, probably one of you on this call, other attendees or panelists, will have a Fitbit device in them. You combine the data on to get an O2 data, oxygen data, sleep pattern, plus the PPG detecting arrhythmia. I don't think they're that far in terms of algorithm. As you know, this is a red light, green light device. So we have the O2 plus the PPG and the activity level. So that's an extra
added layer.
This device, extra layer of this device that we're getting here. Plus, I showed you that two blue arrows that we defined already in terms of predictive algorithms within the device, within the app, that shows us, what does a point care plot look like immediately online? What does the neuromodulation look like? What does your vessel elasticity look like? Which is, as you know, so we're taking that pulse pressure curve, and we have a couple of algorithms looking at those, the beginning, the stroke, in the middle of the pulse pressure curve. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much science here, but we taking this implicate, changes with the vessel elasticity, which could be indicative of heart failure, for example, already now in the device. I call the BioStrap device we're using, but the additional information putting in as a mobile clinic, cardiovascular clinic, which is so much data we can collect from it today.
Okay, I was going to go through my one comment I had was you should really consider this in athletes as part of your marketing niche. One of the things that we've been asked a lot as consultants for trying to oversee testing and clinical work for instance, professional athletes and even local athletes, is how this is affecting their heart. So I think that's really, this could fill that niche dramatically, because I think doing an EKG, as you know, is in a point of time doesn't really make sense and probably can't pick up any subtleties. And I think if you have a bunch of people that are high risk, I think the athletic, they're sort of clamoring for assistance that's a little bit more real time. My other question, I don't know how much time I have for my questions, but does this info go to the physician or the patient, all this AI, in terms of how they're going to interpret it?
So they have the screen. I mean, I showed you a screenshot. The patient have tons of information you can look at. This email, you see that pulse report, they get it per email immediately, and you can see it as what we get is that and the raw data. So for our analysis, we get the raw data, the pulse pressure curve, and digital models, and we're analyzing it. So we get everything digitalized so we can AI it here ourselves. That's part of the whole concept that we're putting at a triad with that tool. So we're taking the next level.
Right, and is there an aspect of it, I know you showed the screenshots, but is there an aspect where it actually tells you if it's bad or good? Because you were showing us some of the data and the work, but is there like a green and a red or something like that that says, oh, your heart rate is too high or your elasticity is too not enough?
Yes, they compare you every day. You wake up in the morning. We'll give you a report, say, listen, you did not exercise too much, you didn't sleep as well. The heart rate variability is high. And on base, this is, if you see at the report you get back, it's based on published data to the patient or to the consumer, say. So in this case, obviously COVID-19 to the patient, you did not sleep well, you're not breathing well, your breath pattern, your heart variability is not within the percentile you should be with based on your age. We're reporting back immediately on a daily basis.
Okay, that's all the questions.
Oh, sorry, Colleen, you're done? Okay. You know, I love from a research perspective, the kinds of answers that AI and predictive analytics can get. And I think that you thinking about putting that information in the hands of the patient, the consumer, is good. I think that's where we need to go. Even if we've often treated in our culture of medicine and patient, you know, provider relationships is often to put the final decision making or interpreting of information back in the hand of the clinician. But I think we're, you know, one of the things I've seen as an investor over the last decade, as more and more data can be real time, is that clinicians can't be just sitting there with a fire hose of information and acting on it. It's still problematic to do so. And you know, we always ask in early stage investment, what does one do with this information? So being able to give clear algorithm-like decision-making guidance to a patient, and you know, anyone doing innovation in this area has to also advocate for what changes in the healthcare system and payer models of handling telemetry and remote monitoring need to change. How do we start to build even white paper reporting out to payers to say, here's what benefit you could get, whether you're dealing with a risk pool that is only a year long in the risk you're looking at or 5 years long. And that is a problem in the payer modeling of things, is that it is often myopic. But I love that you're looking at, you know, giving patients a dashboard. I would just encourage, and maybe this is my only comment, that you get out ahead of some of those translational issues and think about the reality of payers sometimes saying, oh yeah, we'd pay for this, but if you can show that you reduce readmissions, and we want to do a year-long pilot, and it's very difficult for young companies to deal with that at-risk model of reimbursement and those kinds of payer relationships. But it's also not helping move the needle on where we're going with healthcare innovation fast enough, you know? So I love that you're thinking about that interface and what to do to act on this, but we're also gonna learn tremendous amounts about the disease. This is a systemic disease, and you know, it's just, we already have in the last few months learned so much, you know. So thank you. This is very interesting.
Hi, Dr. Marouche. This is Mary Beth Thomas. I want to really applaud your effort to link up physiology with the mental health aspect here. I think that oftentimes we get caught up on the physiological measurements with kind of knowing that the mental health aspect and the behavioral piece is happening in the background, but really struggling to measure that. And so kudos in engaging your social work partners and approaching this in that way, because I think that oftentimes gets lost, and I really like that aspect of what you're doing. I did have a question though on, you know, this really is the data, all the data you're pulling in is great, but it really is a population health approach here. And so what kind of numbers do you need to pull into your pilot study to really reach that statistical significance across your different measurements? And like, have you started to look at that? Because ultimately that will drive when you can start making go, no go decisions on what you see and those types of things.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing this up. And this is the reason why I'm presenting, by the way. That's the number one reason why I'm presenting to you guys. Because we're doing a pilot. We started, in fact, the first patient was recruited yesterday. We are on TV here in Louisiana talking about the study today in the evening news. Because we want to encourage people to be part of the study. So we're starting with 200 patient stages budget to just start promoting this. But what we try and pitch here, how we scale this. We have around 70,000 infected people in Louisiana today. Our goal is really to get at least 20,000 of those into biometric monitoring. And that's what we need, that core. It's all about you investing in the core part of the last slide. How can we have this predictive model to prevent, predict, early detect? And we need a number of patients to make this successful, as you just mentioned. We started the pilot to have everything set, you know, algorithmic places and collecting data and so on, but to scale it, we need the major support to make this happen. And as you know, as a tool, that's okay. Without the doing other stuff is not okay. And we're trying to define a model in place now and give it to the patient, have an interactive from multiple scales, from cardiovascular, structural changes, and mental health changes as well. But yes, we're targeting 20,000 Louisianians to be involved at least. Does this answer your question? I think I lost.
Yes, I went to mute. Yes, no, you're fine. That was great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Those numbers could get you white papers too on modeling lower, you know, 1 year versus 5 year versus 20-year risk too. Arrhythmias versus short-term myocarditis, endocarditis, all of that is a big data set. That's really good.
Thank you.
Payers want to see that.
Great. Well, thank you, panelists and presenter. I think we'll move on to first flight.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I am very pleased to introduce Pandemic Response Network, PRN. Suresh Belu is the director of Duke Institute for Health Innovation, and presenting is Dr. Mark Sendak, who is the Population Health and Data Science Lead at Duke Institute for Health Innovation. Mark, if you want to go ahead and take over the remote control, you are on. You have 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and feedback from our panel.
Wonderful. Do folks see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Mark Sendak, and I'm here to talk about School Community Hub. So I have a 4.5-year-old daughter. Her name is Arya, and she was home with me for a month, starting in early March through early April. And I would say the first month was crazy, like for many of you, but we tried to have fun doing new things and rolling with the punches as we had to. So this is a picture of her cutting my hair with my father-in-law with a beard trimmer, which was the first time she had ever cut my hair. A week later, I walked into her bedroom at around 10 a.m. to get her out of bed. So we had stopped waking her up in our normal routines to get dressed and go to school. And I'd found that she had pulled a ball of hair off her head. So my wife is a pediatrician. I was pretty alarmed. I took a picture, sent it to her. We were able to touch base with a pediatric psychiatrist shortly after, who essentially told us we had to create our own structure. and that at this time when kids aren't going to school, and if you don't create structure and routines around them, they're likely to develop all sorts of bad habits and ways of letting out their anxiety for not knowing what's going on day to day. So that's what we've been trying to do most of the last month. It's trying to create a new sense of normal for our daughter, new expectations for how we interact with each other, and just what daily routines look like. The experience we had in our family is far from rare. There's actually 33 million families across the United States with children who are largely out of school at this point. And when schools are out, it takes a toll on parent and child mental health. And it's actually a really big stressor on our healthcare system. The photo on the bottom right is my older sister, who's a physician in Boston, who worked on a COVID ward for 2 months and actually sent both of her kids to stay with my parents while they were out of school. But the thing that we often forget is that when schools are in session, historically, they've played a central role in public health programs. So the picture on the top right is polio pioneers in the 1950s, where the polio eradication effort began. We're trying to harness the power of schools to build something that can empower schools to monitor medical and social needs and support rapid escalation of care and triage services. School Community Hub delivers immediate value through longitudinal symptom and social support. We have an interdisciplinary team of experts that maintains all of the materials. We have teams of nurses doing proactive outreach for anyone who needs immediate medical attention, and we share data publicly every week with organizational partners as well to inform their decision-making. School Community Hub is a combination of products and services already used at scale. Others were in the process of designing with school partners. It's a simple business model, per member, per month subscription contract, so that schools day to day know which teachers and which learners are eligible for what type of instruction. So where we're at today is that we have a validated symptom support system. We had 5,000 plus participants across the United States. It's the only program available in Spanish. If we have 100 participants, there's 2 day-to-day that we need to call for severe symptoms and 6 day-to-day that we need to call for survey lapses. We have heuristics and algorithms that we've developed with our interdisciplinary team of experts to flag severe symptoms. And we've validated the workflows with a partnership with Duke School of Nursing. This shows the geographic spread across the country as well as the variability in participants. Most people who sign up are either pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic. They enroll without symptoms. They're just looking for a structured way to monitor their symptoms. Once people are enrolled, we have almost 100% retention. From the beginning, we knew that communities of color and Spanish-speaking communities would be hardest hit. So we kicked off a partnership with IDEO, the nonprofit arm of IDEO, IDEO.org, the nonprofit arm of IDEO, around the research question of how do you design COVID support for historically marginalized communities. These 6 insights were surfaced after dozens of interviews with community members and community leaders, and we're carrying these forward into our design. We've met with over 1,000 folks across the country, and these are partnerships that we already have established, including some for-profit companies, some national or state trade associations, religious groups, as well as design experts in designing inclusive technologies. You may be thinking, why are we talking about schools? We're Duke Health, and we're a team that started this out of Duke Health. Unfortunately, the reality is that healthcare and public health is too fragmented at this point to move quickly enough. There's a deep distrust of government and resistance to mandates. Schools are one of the only use cases where a single technology and workflow system with a single business model can be scaled to regions across the US and touch most Americans. There's a combination of federated and centralized decision-making. And while our country is more divided than ever, it's almost the single thing that can bring people together. So we're asking for $411,000 so that over the next 6 months, we can pilot with 2 school districts to get 60,000 students safely back in schools. We're hoping, including my daughter. So we've got a big interdisciplinary team. This is some of the leaders at Duke, and we have leaders from our partner organizations. We have deep expertise in building machine learning systems, data pipelines, data engineering for multiple use cases. We actually have done a lot of work on sepsis the last few years, but quickly pivoted starting in March to work on COVID. So at this point, I'll take questions, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what folks think and how we can work together.
Thank you, Mark. Panelists, do we have questions?
So I'm happy to go.
Great.
First of all, thank you for building this. Related to a lot of stuff that you said, I help take care of my 3-year-old niece, and she's usually hopping on my head during the webinar. So I understand that, and also former Duke alum. So love you guys already from the beginning. So for me, I guess my question is, what we're noticing is that, I have 2 questions. Is what we're noticing is we work a lot. I mean, your target group is the group we care about the most. We notice that there is still a huge technology divide in terms of a lot of students don't have access to high-speed internet or access to technology within their homes. So wanted to know, one, how you're getting your product to those students. And then secondly, we've also seen, you know, districts are facing severe budget cuts. And so I guess my second question is, for those districts, like, are you working with them to get grant funding to potentially cover this, or how do you ensure that those districts also have access to this technology?
Yeah, those are great questions. So the first one I'll call accessibility. And so we've spent a lot of time thinking about accessibility support. So our program is open to the general. And I would say where we see drop-offs in pickup and adoption, one is older adults. So the plurality of our participants are between 60 and 80 years old, but then there's a drop-off over 80 years old. So what we think is happening there is a very low level of independent use of technology. And then the other thing is in historically marginalized communities, so communities of color and Spanish-speaking communities, sometimes there's a very high level of distrust of technology, especially with private use of data. So I'll go back to the IDEO insights, because one of the things we took away from this experience with IDEO.org is that we need to have community-led implementations. So one of the things that we spent a lot of time thinking about is, what are the trusted channels of communication to historically marginalized communities? And the reality is that it's not government in most cases. But when we take a step back and think about public school systems, many of them have been working for decades to build relationships with historically marginalized communities and hiring and training individuals who speak the native language of the students and the families. By no means do I think it's been appropriately resourced to handle the need for the pandemic, but they are a channel of communication that families have trust in. And it's not just school, it's also food services and free meals in these settings. So there is a trust in terms of a government-driven and funded agency that provides support to families. So that's part of what led us to work with schools. In terms of specific workflows to handle accessibility needs, one is we've actually written into multiple budgets, including an FCC grant for interactive voice response technology, so IVR, which would allow people to submit symptoms over the telephone. The other thing is we do have a list of individuals that our volunteers call every day to get symptoms. It's a very low rate of participants compared to those who can complete the surveys in an automated fashion. We send the alerts via email and through text messaging. You don't need a laptop, but you do need a data plan or internet access to complete the surveys, which, based off of our conversations, most individuals do have, even those in historically marginalized communities. The second question about budgets. So yes, we've applied for multiple grant funding from research organizations and from foundations, and we're also exploring opportunities with government. We know that school districts themselves may not be resourced, but we do think it's an opportunity to bring private and public partners, because especially when you talk about public schools and young families, it's really also about getting folks back to work. So there is broad alignment across private and public sectors to at least provide the services that schools need. And we do think the price point is reasonable. We're trying to drive that down as low as we can. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So we have probably time for one more question.
Mark, this is Karen Levert. You just mentioned the price point. When you said price point, were you referring to the BARDA investment or what each school or individual pays?
No, I was talking about the $10 per student per month.
$10 per student per month.
Which we had here.
And that would mean then contracting with every school district.
Yeah, it would be at the school district level or at the state level. But part of why we think the governance model of public schools is better aligned for this type of broad implementation is the fact that we can pilot at a few individual school districts, which we're already in conversations with, but we'd ideally like some pilot funding to test this with 2 school districts, show that it's effective, and we may not even need to wait until the end of the 6 months, but can provide progress reports to start scaling more broadly as well.
Okay, maybe 2 more minutes.
Yeah, Krista, we can let this go to 2:40.
Okay.
I would just encourage you to think about, I mean, so I've been an investor in some companies like Digitability that, you know, the contracting process and redlining and dealing with school districts to get something like this onboarded can be very difficult. And you've got multiple stakeholders in this. And so I would think about how to put something in the hands of families or on a text message basis or teacher led. Teachers certainly want to make sure I'm just struggling a little bit here with the ramp up that would be involved in trying to contract with districts on a monthly subscription per student basis. And I would just also encourage that you think about what the lowest barrier to screening could be earlier in symptoms if this is going to be COVID specific. You know, it's interesting though, schools have been very have focused for years on attendance and discouraging staying home even when sick. So this is a big cultural barrier. It's like, you know, you better be here and doesn't matter if you've got the sniffles, and no, we're going to make it very hard to make up tests. You know, it's a very difficult culture shift. But things like screening for smell, you know, or putting things in the hands of families like sniff, scratch and sniff stickers and things like that can work a little bit on the low-tech side and then allow them to report in to the school nurse or a teacher by text might help allow a monitoring that really has somebody who knows where those students are too in their academics, or who has, you know, had trouble with attendance, you know, kind of making that call. It's tough. The culture of attendance is going to be very hard to overcome with this. And a lot of these are silent hypoxia, non-symptomatic cases, but where they lose a sense of smell. It's going to be very interesting going into the reboot of the school year with this disease.
So I would say as an innovation team, this is probably one of the lower tech solutions that we've worked on. So right now it's a combination of email. So we use SMS Gateway to send the text messages. This is my own record for this. So it opens up my daily survey in my survey queue. I would go in completing this, especially once you've done it a few times, it takes about 30 seconds. We have the logic here for severe symptoms. It's integrated with Microsoft Teams, which is how we send the alerts. So right now we send the alerts to a centralized team, but we would actually work with school districts. If they have a nurse, we could route them to the nurse, or we could staff one of our nurses for each school or have a dedicated team to each district. But it's relatively low tech, and we're exploring also ways to simplify this. Just say, has there been any change from yesterday? And one of the other things I want to mention is that the idea here is not just to do, the school may be able to mandate screening for the students, but one of the other populations is the parents and families. We've at least noticed locally 80% of new infections in Durham County are in the Latinx population. And in that population, many of the children are engaged in healthcare or in the school system, and the parents are not. But this is also a way to reach high-risk adults through their children. So this would actually be offered to families and anyone who lives in the home of the children who attend school.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that as a questionnaire, it's not a heavy tech burden or not data intensive. You know, accessibility, and also what could even be an even earlier super easy screening could be front of mind for actually getting broadly into school districts and broadly in the hands of families.
Yeah, no, and we're working with actually someone on the local board of education in terms of going back to the drawing board and thinking through what are the most appropriate questions to be asking families. Even when we ask for temperature, we don't assume that people have thermometers. So trying to be as bare bones, but still get the medical information we need to run the heuristics and then identify anyone that we need to do outreach for with our nurses.
There's just a lot of silent disease that doesn't have these kinds of classic flu-like symptoms.
Yeah, no, and ultimately being able to identify who's at risk and who may need to be connected with testing as well. And that'll vary more based on geography, but trying to think through what scales geographically and which are the pieces that need to be more customized. Suresh, was that you? Or?
No, the comments are spot on.
Hey, Mark, I would piggyback on what Jennifer was saying in terms of penetration of school districts. And I'm curious about, I don't have an answer to this, but I think it would be good to see if there are other, you know, there's not going to be anything like this, but something similar, a business that has done this, that perhaps there's some type of partnering you can do with that organization to penetrate, because the school districts are very disparate and disparate, and that's what worries me. Even if you get one district, that doesn't mean that you get even the one neighboring one next to it, and I think the decisions would be made at that district level.
And it's interesting when or go ahead, Suresh.
Karen, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's why we are thinking, or rather we will be reaching out to the state level as well to talk to the state secretary for education, and then start with that and see how we could move forward. The other thing, it looks like there could be a significant amount of federal dollars will be made available, looks like $3 trillion or something to that extent, and to really reopen the schools, primarily to support the schools. I think this would be another set of mechanism by which we can bring in the right set of resources to really do that. And we are exploring other partners who are really interested in the opening of the economy in terms of general businesses. And I think there is a tie-in with the general businesses, which also has a relationship with the schools.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we've seen something that's unprecedented in terms of the PPD loans, et cetera. So there could be some opportunities that we're not used to seeing. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. We will have to move to our third presentation. Suresh, Mark, thank you. Panelists, thank you. And I will turn it over to my friend Shauna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Krista. It is my pleasure to toss things now to Lucy Ide, the founder of Remedy, an Atlanta-based health IT company, and she'll share a little bit about how they've pivoted their patient care platform, and those initially focused more on chronic disease management, to the COVID-19 response. Lucy?
Great, thanks very much, Shauna. So I'll be talking about the platform that we have developed for COVID screening, triage and monitoring, and now working to incorporate wearables as an early warning system into that platform and how that all fits into existing clinical workflow. So a little bit about us as Remedy. We're a health IT company based in Atlanta. I'm a physician scientist who decided to become an entrepreneur. And we are really steeped in healthcare interoperability and how technology can enable more data-driven, personalized management. Our background and history has been in chronic disease management, and have really been leaders in the FHIR data standard and interoperability with leading EMR systems. So in late February, we decided to pivot that into what could we do to help address the COVID epidemic. We have a footprint nationally across health systems, from big academic medical centers to smaller regional medical groups and practices. A lot of our clients are in areas with really bad COVID outbreaks right now. So just to sort of give you a concept, maybe visually, of what I'm talking about in terms of the kind of technology that we have built and that we're now leveraging to help address COVID, we have been probably one of the most prolific adopters of something called Smart on FHIR, that just means that it allows us to sort of operate within the electronic medical record so that a clinician never leaves that workflow. We have two-way data exchange with the EMR. And that's really important, right? Because clinicians have very busy days. And so as we start bringing remote patient monitoring type data and other sensor data into their workflow, it has to be incredibly efficient. And our platform is really built around a couple of core tenets. One is this remote patient monitoring. So we work with blood pressure, blood glucose, weight, et cetera, in the chronic disease space. And now we're leveraging that same sort of capability to bring in data specifically related to COVID screening, triage, and monitoring that I'll talk about. But then the other pieces are around clinical decision support and algorithms to help risk stratify populations. And again, how can the technology help the clinicians identify that next best step in care? How can it help notify a patient, as was discussed earlier, about their own risk and what next steps they should take? And really triaging those highest risk, highest need patients to make sure that they are getting the attention that they need. So that's sort of the background and framework and tools that we had at our disposal as we started working on how can we apply that to COVID. And so as we looked at taking kind of this clinical and remote patient monitoring data, marrying it up with our knowledge around healthcare workflows. And then the third piece was really, how can we get ahead of this, right? We can, as I'll show you, do automated surveys and patient-reported outcomes that are being generated automatically from the EMR to certain patient populations. We can get a pulse ox on somebody at home who we know has COVID and is recovering, but we wanted to get ahead of that and say, how can we identify those individuals who are pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic and use that as an additional flag. And so, you know, we've taken, we have at our disposal, right, the risk factors. What comorbidities and diagnoses do patients have? The ability to daily survey patients in a very automated way and use that to drive triage and risk stratification. My clicker's not working. The ability, again, to, you know, use our clinical rules engine. But then a really important part was integrating with a partner company here in Atlanta named LifeQ, who has real expertise around the physiological monitoring on wearable devices, with the differentiator being that they have direct access to the sensors on wearables and on commercially available wearables that are broadly accessible. So like the Samsung watch that I have on and other devices that'll be made available later this summer. And so they have this high fidelity signal that has been validated in other disease states. So I just discussed in the other presentation around atrial fibrillation and obstructive sleep apnea to show really high sensitivity and specificity of detecting anomalies, and has been also validated in a fever model that we're now working to validate is an early warning system for COVID, meaning we can flag individuals who are you know, at risk algorithmically because of these signals we're getting for being more likely to have COVID, and then they would then be tagged for further assessment. So what this allows us to do is to marry sort of the clinical analytics and workflow with this biometric expertise into a really comprehensive unified platform that is highly scalable and very quickly deployable, with the goal of early detection, better use of resources, right? So if we could streamline and prioritize testing for individuals who we've already determined have higher risk of COVID in sort of a white list, gray list, blacklist way, right? So those folks who are getting the green signal, we're not going to spend precious resources like testing and PPE and nursing triage time on, and we're able to focus that on the higher risk individuals. So this all kind of comes together in our platform approach. So you have here at the bottom our existing integrations with the electronic medical record companies. We were able to very quickly, because of our relationships there, get our COVID specific application approved on 5 of the leading EMRs, Epic, Cerner, Athena, NextGen, and Meditech in March. So that was a pretty quick turnaround to get this initial product launched. Through those, we have access to the laboratory testing data around COVID. And then we can pull in from the outside the symptom surveillance that we're doing, and I'll sort of talk in more detail about our initial experience and data from that. And then the current work around integrating in biometric monitoring, specifically the wearable monitoring, but also for those who are managing disease at home, pulse oximetry. That then gives visibility to whoever is sort of, overseeing that population, whether that's a registry for healthcare providers, or we are also doing work with employers who are focused on getting back to work and keeping their employee populations safe. So our timeline, it has been that, in March, we got this product launch, which was really a proud moment with our team that we were able to turn around in about 3 weeks from concept to launch in the market of this automated screening technology that, based on patients who are coming in for appointments, they're automatically screened and triaged for COVID, so that wouldn't have to happen at the door at the front desk. And that is ongoing work. So we've delivered, over 12,000 surveys to date. And again, I'll talk a bit about sort of how that has provided for efficiency for the healthcare systems that we're serving and identification of needs for the patients. We, in parallel, have been working with LifeQ, who is validated their algorithms specifically for COVID detection. Again, it's 100,000 days of wearable biometric data, and now we're working towards validating that in the market together. So the goal would be to launch later this month a pilot specifically targeting COVID and validating those algorithms. We do have the benefit that, given our existing footprint, we have many healthcare providers and systems who are eager partners on this work, because both for their patients and their own workforces, this could be really impactful for how, again, we can more efficiently protect their patients and also protect their frontline healthcare workers. What this looks like visually a little bit. So this is our COVID dashboard that, again, runs in that electronic health record interface. And so from the EHR, we're able to pull in all of the patient demographics and identifiers, as well as COVID testing data. Obviously, vaccination data is going to be very important as we come into the fall with current season flu vaccines, and then hopefully at some point a COVID vaccine. We sort of red light, green light screenings. Today, that means the screening that that individual is taking through the automated surveys on their phone. But as we bring on board the biometric screening, it will give them that red light, green light as to that individual's status. Just a little bit of our experience launching the surveys. So when we sort of wrote up with our clinical partner the initial experience around these first 1,400 surveys that were sent out based on patients who had a scheduled appointment. And we're able to find that about 12% of them required a phone call. So they had risk factors such as chronic disease or age-related risk factors, and were reporting symptoms. And so that was tagged to a triage team who would then proactively call that individual. The individual is also given very specific instructions. You can see an example of the survey. Here on the right, when they finish the survey, they're given very specific instructions about what their next steps should be. Please don't come to the clinic. Here's where your local testing site is, or here's the phone number to call. And able to reinforce social distancing and best practices in those individuals not reporting symptoms. We did follow a cohort who was known to have COVID and was monitoring at home, and were able to then identify both mental health and worsening symptoms and social needs, and triage those to the appropriate resources to make sure those patients continue to get the support they needed. And again, that all pulls together here in a patient view that shows, lab testing, demographics, comorbidities, and then the screenings. So our objective is to provide a continuous non-invasive monitoring of the population with algorithms to detect early signs of COVID and flag those individuals for additional triage and testing as needed. And the approach is that, through this partnership model, we have a long history of working in electronic health record workflows, and can really get this to market at scale quickly, both giving the right direction to patients, but also connecting them into the healthcare system and dedicating healthcare resources to them.
Great. Well, thank you, Lucy. Round of applause virtually. Would like to welcome our panelists to turn their video on, unmute their microphones, and I'm sure Lucy would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I have about 1,000, but I'm just going to stick to a couple. I think the main thing, and I may have missed this, is that I wanted to just make sure that as you're tweaking this thing, if you can think about healthcare workers and staff. I think that's one of the things we're really struggling with. I mean, the patient stuff is obviously critical and important, but I think having healthcare workers who are monitoring themselves, this could actually take the place of like some of the symptom monitoring and screening we have to do when we come in. Like, I'm wearing my little sticker today that I've had my temperature taken. So I would really think about that as an add-on. And then also just in terms of staffing, return to work, this would really help, I think, occupational. I know this is not why you created it, but it could really overlay in with occupational injury management. And then, I may have missed this in the beginning, but does this overlay onto like Cerner? I saw that you had Cerner up there as I was like working on my own medical records here.
Yeah, so real quick to address your first question, we are live with employers with this model as well, helping do the daily screening of their employees and streamline those processes. For them, things like temperature checks may eventually go away as we have better screening modalities that are less time consuming and disruptive. So we're doing that, and those employers could be health systems as an employer or non-healthcare entities as employers. And yes, this is fully integrated with Cerner.
Is transferable from the kind of more traditional population health management application to employee pool or employer need to continue to monitor a whole group of people. Is there any work, whether in this company or others that you're aware of, to try to digitize and collect information on smell and taste, have a screening that's not just literally smelling something? Because, at least from the literature I've seen, temperature remains not a great indicator. Like, even at time of hospitalization, less than 50% had a fever at time of hospitalization. Eventually, most go on to develop a fever, but that's kind of a late biomarker. Do you know if there's some other ways, especially in the employee base, and if you're trying to capture asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people?
Yeah, so we do specifically ask about smell and taste. I've had folks, we will customize these surveys to some degree to each population because there are some unique aspects. But, like, did you taste your coffee this morning? Did your coffee taste different? I mean, you can be pretty granular if you think that's a more effective way of getting good data. I spoke with an employer this morning who said in his geography of about 30,000 employees that he and some other HR professionals manage, over 4 months of temperature checks, they've never picked up a COVID case through a temperature check.
Right. Yeah, so the reason I ask about digitizing and making something more objective around smell and taste is there's still a big disincentive for reporting potential illness. You know, it's still not great for people to miss work, often not also get paid in many contexts, or use up sick days. They don't often even have a lot of sick days. So somebody who says, yeah, I couldn't smell my coffee this morning, doesn't really have a big incentive to necessarily be honest about that. Like so just in the context of the system in which it's being used, you always have to think about that psychology. So any way we can start to automate a better biometric measure of early detection would be good.
And that's part of why we're pushing hard to move to this continuous non-invasive wearable model, right? Because you really can't lie about that or fake that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's doing the best we can with the tools we have today collectively, but that's what we have to keep pushing for.
Yeah, and it protects the employees too, because the employers know you've got a more objective measure, and somebody's not going, oh yeah, I think I can't work today, you know?
Right.
We have time for maybe one, maybe two, if we can be really quick, questions from the panel.
Donna, I have a question regarding, I believe, Lucy, you said that you were on a path to an EUA, and I was just wondering what the, just briefly, if you can tell me what the indication for use would be, you know, kind of, is it as a medical device? Is it as a diagnostic? Is it definitive?
Great question. So that would be, so this is a collaborative model between Remedy and LifeQ, which is, we are separate companies, but we are presenting this as an integrated, solution, because we bring the workflow integration and all of that. So for them to have any diagnostic statement around this wearable, obviously at some point, I believe they would need to go down that pathway. And that's what we're working towards there, right? The goal right now is to collect that data for them to validate the algorithmic models. But correct me if I'm wrong there.
No, I just think that, a typical, diagnostic is a laboratory test result. And I didn't know if you were planning to incorporate test results into the algorithm as part of, to make a definitive call. I think it's going to be a long road to EUA based on physiologic.
Yeah, and really we would like to, our initial plan is to use this as an early warning system, right? Of like, this isn't going to make the definitive diagnostic. This is
.59, so I'll let one last question squeeze in if someone has a quick question with a quick answer. Only long questions and long answers, I suppose. So in that case, I would first love to thank our colleagues at BARDA for taking the time, joining us, telling us more about some of their funding opportunities. If you guys have questions or interest in follow-up, I know some folks are going to be dropping some things into the chat right now, as well as the BARDA Drive Accelerator websites where you can request to have a meeting with any of us. I would also like to thank our panelists. We had a lot of intellectual capital around the table today, and a really diverse experience base and opinions, and so thank you guys all so much. And I know that our companies very much appreciate you all taking the time to give them your feedback as well. You guys are interested in more follow-up, while this was our first Inter-Accelerator event, I think we're all in agreement that we don't think it will be our last. So for all the attendees, be sure to keep an eye out for what we hope becomes a regular series, especially as we work through this public health emergency. And so again, just a big thank you to everyone all around. Big round of applause for everyone.